Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum. In the podcast, I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. I hope everyone is well, wherever you're listening in the world. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas, a fantastic New Year. It's now 2024, and I'm excited for what's in store for this wonderful podcast. So I'm not going to ramble away. I'm just going to get straight into this one and introduce the guest for the first time in 2024 on our 151st episode. And I'm delighted to introduce the drummer extraordinaire from Ash, as well as the man behind Burners Witches. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mr Rick McMurray.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Rick, an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. What an amazing way to start 2024. I'm so looking forward to hearing you talk all about music and Ash and Burners Witches. But I always like to start the pod by asking my guests about their mental health to find out how they're doing. I think it's really important we speak about it. So to start off, Rick, mate, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, we just got Christmas all done. I'm up in Scotland these days, and the kids have just gone back to school. So it's been a little bit of a procrastination day. I have to be honest. I've been sat. Probably should be working on lyrics and getting stuff finished for my album. But you know what? The snooker's on. So I've been sat with a drum pad, just a pair of sticks, and watching the snooker all afternoon. So yeah, that's good for my mental health. But you know, it's like I'm just in the back of my mind. I think I'm working on stuff subconsciously. So yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks for asking.
No worries.
And how are you?
I'm all good. Hard day at work, but I feel like it's getting back into the swing of it now. But I love snooker. I find snooker quite relaxing as well. Do you play much snooker, or are you more of an armchair fan?
Definitely an armchair one. It's like, yeah, I don't get down to the snooker club pretty much at all. I think that was the last time I played. It was quite a while ago. I think we did this weird gig in Dublin, and the dressing room had like a full-size snooker table in it. And after the show, after a few beverages, shall we say, I played our sound engineer, and I was pretty plastered, but I won. That was about the last thing I remember of that night.
At least you remember being victorious, right? Which is always a good memory to have.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't rub it in too much. I don't think it did anyway.
Get him to listen to this podcast so he can reminisce, obviously. So, Rick, I know you started in music very early. I know Ash came through at a very young age. But tell me, firstly, about your kind of earliest musical memories. What do you remember from your childhood about being a kid and your relationship with music?
I've actually been thinking about this quite a bit the last couple of days, because I'm actually going to go and see Steve Harris from Iron Maiden's kind of solo project. It's I think they're called British Lion. It's come about because when we toured at the end of last year, the bus driver we had actually works for Steve Harris, and the bus we were using was owned by Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. And he was just like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be up in Edinburgh. Do you want to come down to the show?" And I was just like, "Oh wow, it'd be amazing to go and see Steve Harris," because that was like very early, sort of musically. And in fact, I was just remembering being like really young. I must have been about, I want to say maybe 8 at the oldest, and going around to a friend's house. And I don't think we listened to the record, but I remember seeing the cover of like Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden and just being like, "Oh wow, what's this?" I didn't listen to it, but it was just like kind of like in fact, it probably goes back a bit earlier than that, because I think when I was like really young, we'd go to the corner shop. My mum would give me money for sweets or whatever, and I didn't buy sweets. I bought heavy metal like pin badges, and this must have been the age of maybe 5 or 6.
Wow.
So I was into the logos and the kind of looks of the sort of metal stuff even before I'd heard any of it. But yeah, it's just like going out to see Steve Harris's band tomorrow night, and I don't know whether I'll meet him or not, but yeah, it's just like remember like having like the Live After Death VHS when I was about 11, and just like wearing the tape out. I just like watched it every day. It was just like amazing. I remember asking my brother like, "What do you think the easiest job in a band is?" And he was like, "The drummer." And I was like, "All right, I'm going to be a drummer then," and here I am, years later as a drummer. So yeah, but yeah, it wasn't all heavy metal. I think when I was I had a babysitter. Weirdly enough, I just got a babysitter for my kids so I can go out and see this gig tomorrow night because my wife's away. Oh yeah, babysitter who her boyfriend was like really into sort of mod stuff. He had like the Vespa and stuff, the big parka and whatever. And I remember her coming up to the house and playing this like cassette that he'd given her of like a load of like early Who singles and Kinks and stuff like that, and just like I remember hearing that and just knowing it was like really different from anything I'd heard in like Top of the Pops or whatever growing up. It just like sounded like from a different planet, and it really caught me. It was stuff like probably the Kinks stuff stuck with me a bit more, like Waterloo Sunset, Dead End Street. It was just like a bunch of these sort of great songs, and it really, I think like the storytelling aspect of it really kind of like grabbed me as a kid as well. It's just like the whole like Terry meets Julie and stuff. It was like this the whole story like in this the kind of 3 minute song. So yeah, that was like a big influence as well. So.
And apart from obviously drums being the easiest instrument, I'll say in quotation marks because I'm sure having been behind a drum kit, it's not at all. What else drew you to the drums?
I don't know, because I actually started playing guitar before I started playing drums. It was like, I think my brother had an acoustic guitar, and I just kind of started picking that up, and he showed me a bunch of chords. And then I got an electric guitar when I was about 11 years old, and I just was playing that for a couple of years. And then I kind of thought, everyone I know plays guitar. You kind of need a drummer to play band. It's just like, if you play guitar, someone can play bass, but it's like, if you're going to start a band, there needs to be a drum kit. And it's sort of from that sort of light bulb moment, it's sort of becoming sort of obsessed with it. And I remember listening, this is quite embarrassing actually, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I was listening to a band called, I don't know if you remember a band called Great White.
Oh, very vaguely.
Awful metal band, but I was listening to some live recording I had of theirs, and I was just like listening to it, and it's just suddenly the drums just like really like jumped out to me, and I was just like could hear for some reason my ear just like honed in the drums, and I was just like, I reckon I could do that. And then it's just sort of like hands and knees, whatever, just going like, oh yeah, I can like kind of keep time to kind of follow along what's going on that. And then I was just like, I want a drum kit. I don't even know if I mentioned to my parents if I wanted a drum kit. I think I went to the music shop in like sort of local town. My dad went to like I used to go to football matches as a kid with my dad, but then around the age of 11, I started just like going around all the like record stores and like music stores. So I went to this music store I knew, and it was just like I just went, oh, there's a pair of like black drumsticks, I'll have them, and had these 2 pairs of drumsticks, and I just like sort of like drummed along on I think it was like sat in my bed with like a beanbag and stuff, and just like drumming along to just like whatever I was listening to, and it's going like, this is, yeah, I'm kind of getting something going here. So I didn't get a drum kit for Christmas, but then my parents turned up like, I think it must have been like February or March or something like that, and they just like came home and they had a drum kit in the car. I was just like, what the fuck is this? Like, I had no idea. I don't know. I think they were probably realised that I was just like spending my entire teenage years in my bedroom, and I wasn't going out with mates or doing anything. So it was like, right, let's give them something to do. So I got a drum kit, and then off I went. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, like I alluded to, Ash, a really young band when they kind of broke through. Was Ash your first band, or were there like other bands with mates before Ash?
Yeah, it was like the first band I joined. I mean, I think like Tim and Mark, I think it's like, kind of well known that they played from a very young age. They were, I think, 11 years old when they met, and they got like guitars for Christmas. And with the like, even before they learned how to play, they were like, we're going to start a band. And they'd been kicking around for a while. They were like the year below me in school, so I kind of knew who they were. But I think me and Tim met through doing this school play called The Suicide, which is this like mad Russian play. In fact, one of my mates who was in the play just sent me her copy of the script recently, which is quite mad. I haven't read it again yet, but if you're listening, thank you, Kate, for sending that over. I played this like drunken Russian, I think it was a detective. It was definitely a very drunken role. But yeah, I met Tim in that, and he was playing this, like, I guess it was like, itinerant musician in the play. I think there was this like whole, like, this guy had like faked his own death or something like that, and he was like at his own wake and stuff, and had this like big like Russian wake, and there was all these musicians playing in it. So Tim was playing the part of one of these musicians. He had a guitar there, and it was just like, oh, can I have a play on your guitar? And I sort of played on it, and he was like, oh yeah, me and a couple of mates are getting together in the Easter holidays, and we're going to just like get together and play a few songs. So we played together. I went round, and it was just like we were kind of doing like cover versions and stuff. And I think Mark actually came round. He wasn't playing in the band, but he just came round to hang out, to check out what was going on. And then I think it was like a few months after that, Tim was like, "Oh, do you want to get together again?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'll be fun." They turned up and it was just him and Mark, and they were like, "Right, we've decided we want to kick out all the other guys in the band. Do you want to join our band?" I was like, "Yeah, sounds good to me." So that's where it started. I think we like within a week we'd gone into the studio to record a bunch of songs, which was totally mad. I'd never been in a band before, and then like within a week we're recording our first stuff.
I guess at that stage, did you realise kind of what you were onto? Because I guess it just felt normal, I guess, for you, but obviously not, because it was such a great time to launch the band and great early tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd actually seen like Tim and Mark's previous band called Vietnam. They played at like some like, I think it was like a Children in Need fundraiser at school. I saw Tim and Mark's first band called Vietnam at school. They were doing like a Children in Need fundraiser thing, and so there was like, I think there was 3 guys from their school, but then there was these 2 older guys who were like 18. They left school and they were in this band with Tim, which was kind of weird because they're in a band with a bunch of 15-year-olds at that point. When you're that young, that's like a massive gap. It's like, these guys are adults and these guys are younger than me. What's going on? But they were very much a kind of a metal band. But I think within a few months of that, it was like kind of 1991. I think it's like Tim and Mark into Nirvana and that kind of thing changed everything. And they get rid of all the old metal guys, and they were like, right, we're going to start a new band. And it was kind of mad, exciting time. I think I just sort of finished my like GCSEs or something like that, and then suddenly I'm playing in this band. It's just like kind of amazing.
And I guess very successful very early on. Did the success surprise you? And I guess how did you cope with it at such a young age?
I think with Tim and Mark, they were very driven from a very young age. Because remember, we've been playing. I think their first band was kind of seen as a little bit of a joke amongst sort of other bands in the area. All the other bands were kind of like cooler. Were switched on to the kind of like the alternative stuff, and were probably kind of better players than their original band. So I think they felt they had a lot to prove in the early days, and they were very driven as well. It was very much like, right, it's like we're doing demos. We're going to like try and get a record deal. So there's always, I think from the outside it probably seemed like this band sort of came from nowhere and they're signed like super young. But I remember like us sitting around going like, oh man, it's like, how the hell do you get a deal? We were just like really kind of frustrated about not really getting anywhere without having any sort of idea of how we could get there. So there's definitely a kind of this frustration in the early days. We actually had I'm trying to remember the name of the label, but it was Daisy Chainsaw's label, whoever that was. I think it was One Little Indian.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think they'd shown a bit of interest because they got a hold of a demo tape that we'd sent out, and they were showing a little bit of interest, and then suddenly it just went really cold. So we were just feeling like really disillusioned at this point. But I knew this is, it's like, I guess probably a year after we'd kind of come up with the name Ash and done our first demo. So yeah, there's a little bit of frustration at that point. But yeah, I guess it's like when you're that age, it's like a year feels like a lifetime. But in hindsight, yeah, anyway, things did happen pretty quickly. But it was kind of weird. It was almost like we were living a double life in the early days, because I think most of our sort of peers in school and stuff weren't really that aware of what we were doing, because to be honest, they weren't really into that kind of music or that alternative scene. It's like if you mentioned anything like Mudhoney or the Pixies or whatever, you could have this like Blank Look or whatever, and just people were just into like pop stuff or whatever, or into football, or it just didn't seem to be something that was even worth talking to a lot of people about. So it was almost like, we're doing stuff in school, and then we're going away to do, gigs and on weekends and during school holidays and stuff like that, and doing a bit of recording. So I guess, with that sort of thing probably kept us a bit grounded, and it felt like we were living 2 lives at once.
How does it feel now, I guess, when you go back and listen to like those early recordings and like that first album? Do you still listen to that, or will you not kind of go back and listen now?
It's been a long time since I've sat down and sort of re-listened to especially the really early stuff. For me, I don't really dwell on that stuff that much. I'm always kind of thinking about what's next. But I think we used to sit down and listen to a lot of stuff, and it's like, it's weird because it's like, yeah, it's just always about what's next and what's coming up, and sort of pushing yourself as a musician. It's like, I think if you're not sort of like trying to grow all the time, you're not gonna continue doing it. That's like the whole point of it for me, to keep sort of like getting better, coming up with new ideas, and just keeping focused on it. So yeah, I mean, I think the very early, if you're talking about the very early demos, I mean, I actually, I think it would be fun to sit down and listen to those, just going like, oh my God, the playing, this is atrocious. But it's all part of the learning experience. I don't get too precious about things, and that's maybe because we have grown up in the public eye so much. It's kind of forced us to be sort of like a bit sort of thicker skinned, or it's like you got to be able to sort of laugh at yourself when you make mistakes, or because these things are. I guess in a way we were kind of learning as we were doing it. There wasn't a huge period of like touring before we got signed. It was all very much done in the public eye. So yeah.
And you seem like a very close unit, and you're obviously doing it for completely the right reasons. You're not like in it, from my perspective anyway, for money. You're in it for the music and to keep driving Ash forward. How did lockdown affect the band, right? Because that must have been such a difficult period anyway, but trying to be in a band and being with two guys and then not being with them for a year, 2 years. How did that affect the band?
Yeah, I mean, it was a mad period for all of us, obviously, but for me, I think we'd been touring in Europe just as the pandemic was sort of hitting Europe. It was like coming into Italy in early February, and we were kind of like, felt like we were kind of like, it's all right, we're going north, we're kind of like heading away from it, it'll be fine. But it eventually caught up with us, so about halfway through the tour, so it took a long time to sort of go, hang on, this isn't going to happen. We were just like, a couple of weeks off, and we'll rearrange stuff, and it'll be fine. But it definitely, there was a feeling of this is very much unfinished business going on here, and it took a few months to kind of accept that this is going to take a while. But there was, I don't know, it almost felt like there was some sort of carrot being dangled of like a prospect of some gigs happening, and there was this talk of this like drive-in tour that Live Nation were going to do, and we were up for that, and then that got pulled like right at the last minute, just before they paid the bands, funnily enough. So not that I'm bitter, but yeah, so that was just like, it's just like, right, we've got to rearrange the tour again. It's just like, it just felt like this ruling kind of expectation. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of lucky where I live. I'm like kind of right in the edge of the city, so it's like pretty much just like turn the other way at the bottom of the road. I'm in the countryside and stuff, and it's just kind of, that was good in terms of mental health. Got really into walking, and I quit drinking right at the start of the pandemic as well. I was going to go one way or the other, and thankfully it went the right way. So yeah, it was a weird experience, but some good stuff come out of it. But yeah, I mean, as a band, we were just like, there were periods where we're going like, when the hell are we going to get in the room again? It's like, yeah, I think it was like 14 months we were apart. Obviously, we're living in different places, and that was mad. Like getting back into the rehearsal room, we're going like, are we going to remember what we're supposed to do here? But I've got to say, it was probably one of the best days in a rehearsal room ever. Which I don't know any bands that really like rehearsing. It does feel like a bit of a chore, but this was like kind of felt like playing Wembley Stadium, just to get in a room and just wheel on a kit with the other guys in the room. So yeah, it felt like that was like a huge release.
Yeah, I can imagine the outlet of emotion as well in that room. And delighted to say Ash still going very strong. Recently released the excellent Race the Night album. That's a fantastic album. I think it's a great album. Anything different, I guess, these days in terms of like the recording processes that you're doing that you weren't doing when you first started?
Oh man, recording we were like just going back to the very early days. We're releasing demos on cassettes, running off our own cassettes and stuff like that. Everything was recorded on tape. So it's like, with just like computer technology in the studios, like changed the way everything works these days. We can do stuff remotely. We can do stuff pretty much anywhere. If you've got a computer and a few interfaces or whatever, or a few preamps, you can do it anywhere. But I think with this album, it's the first time. It's like some of it was recorded in New York, where Tim and Mark were living. We had our own studio over there, which we had from 2005. So some of this album's from predates like sort of pandemic, and then some of it sort of post that. So I actually got to do some recording here in Edinburgh for the first time, kind of like sort of living at home and recording, and found this really cool studio and great guy to record drums with called Graham Young, and yeah, we're lucky to get into his studio and do a bunch of recording there. So that was the biggest change on some of this album. Anyway, but yeah, our New York studio is no more because Tim's moved back to the UK. So I think it was great having our own studio, but it's kind of nice being out of that comfort zone and sort of like just sort of being somewhere else and shaking it up.
And towards the back end of last year, you were on tour with the Subways. So the video clips I've seen look like that was a great tour, looked like great fun. How was it touring with, like another band to that extent?
Yeah, it's great. It's like they're a great band. It's like it's just a phenomenal live band. So it's like it's always good to have something like that. It really keeps you on your toes. And yeah, cool. Yeah, it's like we got out and we did 3 weeks around Europe with them. We did a couple of weeks here in the UK as well. So yeah, brilliant band. And we kind of like sort of known them through a few other people over the years, but spent kind of 3 weeks on the same bus as them was super fun.
Yeah,
for sure.
I bet it looked great. And as well as Ash, Rick, you have Burned as Witches, which I believe is just a pure solo project, but I didn't realise it was a solo project, right? So I guess tell us about Burned as Witches and kind of the difference between what you're doing in that and Ash.
It's like it's just sort of like I've always sort of like dabbled in doing stuff with this. It's kind of the first time I've had any sort of project where I've been like, right, I'm going to see this through. I've always sort of like done a few like collaborations with a few people and stuff, and it's always there's always a lot of ideas there, but actually getting stuff across the line, this is the first time I kind of like took the decision. It's like, right, if I want to finish stuff, I got to do this myself. So kind of like taking on every role in the band. But yeah, I mean, it kind of grew out of our agent, who we were very close to, Steve Strange, who's been with us since like 1994. He passed away in 2021, September 2021. I think this project kind of started as he was a huge like metal fan, and it almost kind of started as a kind of bit of therapy, sort of dealing with the loss. He was only 53 years old, died of cancer, unfortunately. But it's kind of my way of kind of like sort of processing that whole time, and it kind of felt like it was almost like kind of therapy for me. So it's like to be honest, it almost started out I was going to do like a tribute album to him, but it was sort of like it felt like that was like kind of a bit much. But I think you'd be kind of proud of it. No matter, one day I was just like, you know what, it doesn't all have to be about him. It's just like he's the inspiration behind it, and that's kind of like motivated me to kind of get stuff across the line. So yeah, I've been recording that for on and off for about a year, and I'm just using the snooker as an excuse not to write lyrics. I mean, I have got lyrics written. It's just like there's like 2 songs I need to rewrite, and sort of like after Christmas and stuff, I'm kind of slowly easing my way into that. So yeah, we'll see what happens with it. I don't know really have any expectations, but I think just on a personal level, just having something that I finished myself will be, that'll be the victory.
Absolutely. So only early January, so a lot of time left in 2024, Rick, to get that finished and complete that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got my mate Graham. He's saying, right, let's mix this in March. So I've got a deadline, but it's getting there. It's getting there.
I look forward to hearing from it, and I know there's a few tracks on Bandcamp, isn't there? So there's a few tracks if anyone's interested that you can find there.
I mean, they're rough as hell, but I basically I come up with the name. It was just like I come up with a few names, none of which were quite I think everything I thought of, I googled it. I was like, oh, that's taken. And then when I come up with that, it was just like I was expecting that to be taken as well. And then when it wasn't, it was just like someone's going to take this. I need to delay it. So I just like I ended up. I think I had COVID at the time, but I ended up sort of mixing a couple of demos and flinging them out onto Bandcamp in a sort of fevered. So yeah.
So moving away kind of from your own music, I'm going to go now to like your own musical taste. So I guess music-wise, What are you into, Rick? Is there a multiple amount of genres? Are you into one genre more than the other? What are you into? What would Rick McMurray listen to on any typical given day?
I kind of listen to I've kind of got a wide range of sort of musical tastes, but I think like obviously doing this metal project, I've been listening to like metal a lot over the last year. But yeah, I mean, it's like I don't know, I can't pin. I mean, I go through phases of listening to jazz and stuff. There's just like insane like jazz drummers out there, and I love a bit of chaos as well. Been listening a load of Joy Division recently. I always find it hard to sort of answer that question. It's just like it just depends, you know. I don't think of stuff that in sort of categories. To be honest, it's just like it's like I don't know. I don't know. It's just like my mood changes from month to month to week.
And you mentioned Joy Division.
Whatever. It's just like,
you mentioned Joy Division, Rick. Anything else at the moment you're listening to, whether that's like new or old? What have you got on at the moment? So at the moment, there's loads of great new music out. There's a band, I can't remember their names, like a new Irish band, female singer, who like they're going to have a top 10 album, and their name's escaping my head, like The Straits, I think they're called. I'm really enjoying that album. That's a great album.
Right.
Anything else you've got on at the moment?
Well, we listened to I was listening to a lot of Lankum yesterday, Soundgarden, but yeah, it was sort of like you listen to a bunch of like mad electronic stuff as well. So our sound engineers, like they on the bus with the subways, it was like it definitely caused a bit of a rift because our sound engineer was putting on this like just it's pretty hardcore techno and stuff, and it was just like me and him were just like loving it, just like immersing ourselves in the sounds, and just like we kind of looked up and just like everyone had gone to the other lounge in the bus. So yeah.
So
yeah,
you mentioned Rick as well.
I guess I like quite a lot of extreme stuff. But it could be extreme pop, or it can be extreme electronica, or it can be extreme metal. That's the thing I've got into on the Subways tour as well. I was like warming up every day to Slayer.
Nice.
So that's just like stick on it's only like 40 minutes for a whole album, so it's just like we're on in an hour. I just get the headphones on and just like put on the Slayer and just like sit and drum along, or attempt to drum along at their.
So you already said you listened to The Great White before, that you said was fairly embarrassing. I always like asking my guests what their first record was or what their first single was, and I say there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure on this podcast. It's just a pleasure, right? So what was the first single that you bought, Rick? And do you remember buying that?
Yeah, I must have been maybe about 8 or 9, or maybe a bit younger than that, but it was Nick Kershaw, I Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me.
Classic. I think that's a classic.
Yeah.
It comes on the radio a lot in our car, and every time it does, it's always volume up as opposed to volume down. Yeah. I think that was the first one. I think the same day, I think my brother bought like an AC/DC. I can't even remember I can't remember what the A side was. It was like a 12-inch, but there was like 2 live tracks. But I remember hearing TNT and going like, "Damn, he's got the best record." That's fair enough. And Rick, this podcast is all about our guests getting to collect their fantasy festivals. I'm sure you've been around your fair share of festivals, obviously being in Ash. Are you a big fan of the festivals? Yeah,
definitely. It's a great way to see stuff that you maybe wouldn't normally go and see. It's always fun to like just go and check out what else is happening that day for sure. Yeah, and I think the older I get, the more I enjoy playing outdoors as well.
Okay. Do you have a favourite festival that you've played? A favourite festival maybe experienced at all?
I mean, we've done like Reading was always a big one for us. Because remember, it's probably the only festival that I went to before that we didn't play at. I remember it was '94. We went to Reading and hung out, and we weren't playing that year, but we were just like our managers going like, "You guys are going to be playing this time next year." We're like, just wow, this is amazing. We got to hang out backstage as well, so it's probably not your typical festival experience, but we're just going like, oh wow, it's like a year's time we're going to be here. This is insane. So ever since then, Reading's been a big deal for us. I think we probably played Reading 10 times over the years, which I'm sure it's got to be some sort of record. I think the only person that's played it more than us is probably Dave Grohl.
Yeah, probably.
He's done it in loads of bands, so that doesn't count, Dave.
Doesn't count. No, multiple bands don't count, Dave. Only if you're in the same band. So, like I said at the top of the pod, the aim of this is getting our guests to collect their fantasy festival. So Rick gets to choose any 5 acts who make up his fantasy festival lineup and an encore, which all 5 acts perform together at the end of his Fantastival. So for any first-time listeners, very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So my Christmas special last year in episode 150, I had the Murdered Song of the Day guys on. They collated their Murder Under the Mistletoe Christmas Fantasy Festival. In their opening act, they had the Heavy North on. Super Seconds, they had Dictator. Midway Madness, they had The Prodigy. Pre-headline act, they had Sylvie. And for the headline act, they picked themselves to do their headline slot. So Murdered Song of the Day lads went up and performed. And for their encore, as it was a Christmas episode, all their acts together performed Live Aid, Do They Know It's Christmas Time? So very, very simple concept, very fun. But before we get to choose your 5 acts, Rick, you're going to come up with a name for your fantasy festival and a venue. So Rick, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
I obviously didn't read that bit of the that bit of the message close enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this pedal and we're going to call the festival Fuzz Worship.
Oh, mate, that's an amazing name. I think that's worked there in your favour. So we've got Fuzz Worship.
Yeah, it kind of. Yeah, I was just like, oh shit, and then it was like, oh, hang on, this probably works really well. So luckily I had that pedal there.
I would definitely go to a festival called Fuzz Worship all day long. I wouldn't even question it. I wouldn't even need to see the lineup. I'd instantly buy tickets.
I mean, this actually, looking at this pedal, it's got like a few. I guess, it's like not many people are going to get to see this, but I hold this up like that.
Wicked.
We've got Architect of Reality as well, which I think that would be a pretty good festival name.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. I think we've nailed that one.
And future guests who are paying as much attention as I am, just grab the nearest object. You'll be amazed at what you'll find.
Absolutely. And Fuzz Worship can be anywhere in the world, right? It can be a venue big or small. It can be Edinburgh. It can be Ireland, UK, States, wherever you want to take us, Rick, we'll go. So where do you want to hold your fantasy festival?
I mean, if it's called Fuzz Worship, it's almost like it needs to be held in a church.
Let's do it.
As I get into this thing, like, I think it's sort of like a lockdown hangover. Just like walking's become my thing. I was just walking around earlier on today, and we passed there's a little sort of village just up the road from where we are. And there's a little like graveyard in there. So I was just looking at the church and going like, I really want to record some drums in there. It's like, I think, I don't know. It's maybe my perverse nature, or maybe it's like growing up in Northern Ireland or whatever. I don't know, but I just want to record drums to a metal album in a church. So we might need something bigger than a church. I don't know, but yeah, maybe in a graveyard.
In a graveyard, all right. I like it. Do you know what? I'm with you on the walking thing. I think since lockdown, I've got quite into walking. There's nothing I like more than getting my headphones in and going for like a walk for about an hour or two and just kind of switching off. And it's so good for the mind as well. I don't know if that's an age thing or if that's a lockdown thing, or maybe even having kids and you just need to maybe just escape for like an hour or two or whatever. But I'm totally with you on that one.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, it's just like kind of clears your head. And if I don't do it, I definitely feel weird about not doing it these days. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like over the years I've tried running, and it's so easy to put off. I'll look out the window and go, it's raining. God, I don't want to get changed. Or it's like walking, just like fling on a coat, out you go, and you're doing it.
Yeah, with you on that one, totally. So you get 5 acts. I'm sure whittling down to 5 acts has been quite difficult. Before we talk about the 5, Rick, any acts who you want to shout out, who you love, but just aren't getting in to the graveyard and aren't joining us in Fuzz Worship?
Yeah, oh God, there's got to be tons of. I tried to stick to. I don't know. I mean, I guess in one way there may be obvious bands that I've picked, but I didn't want to resurrect John Lennon or anything like that. But there's definitely a temptation when you're doing something like this to pick bands that you never got to see or whatever. But it's like, nah, actually, don't listen to me. We've got some bands that can't get back together. We've got one band that can't get back together at least. So, but yeah, it's like I'm sure everyone wanted, go. The first band that crosses their mind is probably the Beatles.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? It's funny because when I started it, that was my presumption, but they actually haven't been picked. Obviously, they've been picked, but they don't get picked as much as what you think people will pick them. And people have a very different. Everyone's so different in their stance towards the podcast, which makes this quite an enjoyable podcast to host because you never quite know where you're going with it. So, as the host, I really enjoy it because I've got no idea who you're picking and where you're going. So it's really it's quite it becomes quite a personal thing to people. So, looking forward to seeing who you pick.
Yeah, I guess I probably could have picked a bunch of bands that people might expect, like being like bands that the drummer from Ash would be, associated with, whatever. But I've kind of not really done that. It's more, yeah. Well, I mean, it's called fuzz worship, right?
That was like
I think you probably know where I'm going with this.
Oh, absolutely. I remember Steve Firth from Embrace, bass player, came on about 2 or 3 years ago, and his lineup was all like old, like 70s, like punk bands. And you're thinking, wow, this is brilliant because you wouldn't necessarily associate the bass player from Embrace with liking all this kind of stuff well out of their comfort zone. So each their own. I'm looking forward to seeing where we're going with this. So it's 2:00. The graveyard's packed out. Amazing day. It's time for your opening act to come on the stage, Rick. So who are you going to have open your fantasy festival?
We're going to go with the Breeders.
Great shout. So why the Breeders for you, then, Rick? Why are they going to open your fantasy festival?
I just like it. I think it's probably one of the albums that's just like always been with me since it came out. Last Splash, particularly that album throughout the years, and it's like I go through periods where I haven't listened to it in a long time, and every time it sort of pops up, and I'm just like, I listen to it. It's just like it still just gives me shivers, just like how great that album is. I think the sort of production of it, the whole sound of it, just there's some sort of dark magic going on in that for me. Yeah, and it's just Kim Deal's voice is just like amazing. The guitars sound amazing. Just the songs are so cool. I mean, it's quite left field as well, but it's like got incredible pop moments on it. It's got incredibly dark moments. It's got very druggy moments on it as well. And yeah, it's just like every once in a while, when it comes on, I haven't heard it in a while. It's just like it's mind blowing all over again.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
All right. So the Breeders are going to be your opening act. This is actually the first time the Breeders have been picked for a fantasy festival lineup. So one new act added to the roster. So the Breeders going to open. They're going to play from 2 till 3. We're going to take a half-hour break, and it'll be time to get your Super Seconds act on, Rick. They're going to play from 3:30 to 4:30. So who are you going to have in your Super Seconds act, Rick?
I mean, I've been wondering about sort of juggling this about. I think we're going to go with Nick Drake. Okay, I was maybe going to put him on a little bit later, but I think this is probably the right slot. It's a kind of just like some beautiful calm before the storm. I remember, I probably get into Nick Drake around like 1995, 96, something like that, and just like it's just like I don't know, his music, his songs, his guitar playing are just absolutely fantastic. There's three albums there. It's a short career and cut tragically short, but it's absolutely flawless. His entire back catalogue. Even like a bunch of like home demos that were released or whatever, that every song in that as well. It's just like there was not a bad song, and again, just a fantastic artist who I continually come back to. And one day I will actually sit down and try and play guitar like that, because it's very inspiring, but it's also very daunting thing as a musician to go like I want to copy this because I know I'm going to fall flat in my face, but screw it.
The thing I love about Nick Drake is it's almost mysterious, almost. So I'd never heard of him until I started working like a record shop, and I feel like if you go and search YouTube, like you ain't going to come across much of Nick Drake. You're going to have to work to find it, but I think when you find Nick Drake, you get heavily rewarded. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of books out there, but yeah, it's like when I was sitting thinking about this list for the Fantastival, I was sort of across my. I was going like, you know what? You're really into artists who have this sense of mystery about them, and then I was like, do they? I was like, maybe they don't. Maybe it's just me, and it's just that like their music's so good, I don't want to know anything about them in a way. Yeah.
You know, because there was a few bad. Like, I was thinking about putting the pick, sort of going back to the original question. I was like thinking to put like the Pixies on, maybe Led Zeppelin and stuff. I was going like, oh yeah, they're sort of like don't really. They had a aura of mystery about them. I was like, maybe just because you didn't read all the interviews about these bands and you never felt the need to kind of like seek out any sort of stories behind them. And it's maybe because the music's just more than enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't think there is that much on Nick Drake, really. I mean, you know, if he came out now, he'd have all his gigs filmed. He'd be on this platform, that platform. But I think back in the day, there wasn't much about him. It's interesting you mentioned Steve Harris, because this is the third time Nick Drake's been chosen the Fantasy Festival. I had Steve Harris's nephew on, who's a drummer. He drums for Twin Atlantic, a guy called Joe Lazarus. He also picked Nick Drake. So if you do meet Steve Harris tomorrow, you can say you got the same Fantastival pick as his nephew. Small world.
Yeah. Small world.
Small world indeed. All right, so Nick Drake is your Super Seconds act. He's going to play from half.
Going to say, sorry, just before we leave the Nick Drake, it's one like our sound engineer uses like a Nick Drake song, Hazy Jane, to like tunes the PA. So I hear that song every day we do a gig, and I'm still not sick of it, you know. Amazing. And that's how good it is.
Amazing. There must be an emotional sentiment to that as well, I guess. Like in terms of feeling just about before you're about to go on stage and hearing that as well.
Yeah. Well, it's more of an afternoon like sound check thing actually, okay. But yeah.
Brilliant stuff. All right, Nick Drake. He's playing Super Seconds. He's confirmed. He gets an hour. We'll take a half-hour break after Nick Drake. That takes us to 5 o'clock. Time for your Midway Madness. So great first two acts. So Rick, who's going to be your Midway Madness act?
No, this is well. I think I'm going to go. Yeah, we're going to go Soundgarden. I think that'll be a nice transition. And I think the reason I picked Soundgarden is just I never really was into them that much. Like back in the 90s, I never really sort of gave them much of a second thought, to be honest. But I think over probably the last 2 years and stuff, I've just become like really obsessed with like Super Unknown and Bad Motorfinger. And I probably started like from a drumming point of view. It's just like hearing something, just going, oh bloody hell, this, you know, the drums in this are absolutely fantastic. But the more I've listened to it, the more I've kind of like got drawn into it. I think it was probably, you know, when they were sort of like kicking about, it was like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, the whole grunge explosion. And I think, you know, as a band, we were very much in the Nirvana camp. Yeah, never really got it at the time, but yeah, it's just become one of my go-to things like over the last while. And it's just, you know, I think there's a lot of stuff in there just as a musician, just sort of listen to, especially as a drummer with weird time signatures going through a lot of stuff. It's I can listen to it and like find new bits in it sort of every time. And you know, been checking out a load of YouTube live stuff over the last few months as well, and just blown away by their performances.
I know you said you've in the last 2 years you've kind of really got into them. I guess, were you ever lucky enough to see Soundgarden?
I don't think so. No. I'm sure I would have remembered if I had. I'm trying. Yeah, I mean, I think. I mean, there's a chance that our paths may have crossed at festivals, but I don't really recall it, to be honest. So yeah, I don't think so.
Fair dues. All right, Soundgarden, only the second time they've been picked for a fantasy festival. So they're your Midway Madness act. They're going to play 5 till 6. Take a half-hour break. Then it'll be time for your pre-headliners. We're going to play your fantasy festival from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Rick, so 3 acts down, 2 to go. Who's going to be your pre-headliner at Fuzz Worship?
We're going to go with Faith No More. Nice. As we started off talking about VHSs and me wearing out like Iron Maiden VHSs, this was another one that I did. I had the Live at Brixton Faith No More when I was a kid, and it was just like, I don't know, there's something about it. It was like kind of they're a bit metal, but they've got like all these other elements kind of creeping in there, and it's just like there just seemed to be a lot of depth, and it just like felt like a, you know, certainly for a metal, it was for a little metal teenager in like, you know, 1989, 1990, it felt like this was like a giant leap forward sort of musically. You know, being an adult, you're kind of aware that, okay, there was all this other stuff that kind of informed where they were coming from, but you know, being a kid at that point, it was just like, wow, they're like, you know, they're taking music to places I never knew existed, and it just felt like, you know, it felt like this like, hugely kind of exotic kind of thing. And I think I did get to see a little bit of them live in 2009, but I was also kind of, I think I saw maybe 3 songs. I think the rest of the time I was babysitting our producer's drunken teenager. Yeah. So I would like to see the whole thing now, please.
All right, your wish is our command. They're going to be your pre-headline act at your fantasy festival. They get to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We'll take one more break. It'll be time for your headline act. We're going to get 2.5 hours to headline your fantasy festival, Rick. So a great first 4 acts, but who are you going to have headlining and be the last act on at your fantasy festival?
We're going to have a very specific Black Sabbath set. We're going to have everything that was released before 1975 and nothing after. Thank you very much.
So I guess why Sabbath then as a starting point, and then why that? I guess it might be an obvious answer, but why kind of that period as opposed to anything else?
Well, I think that, you know, Sabbath, they're a funny band. They're a weird band. I mean, they've released some of the greatest, most profound music. They've spawned, you know, their own genres. I mean, arguably metal, you know, they get credit for metal, right? But arguably, the grunge wouldn't exist without the Sabbath sound. I think it's like, you listen to Bleach, you listen to Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. They're so like heavily indebted to Sabbath. You know, it's like the size of those riffs. You know, it's like, you know, punk was very much credited as a big influence, but I think it's probably about 30% punk and about 70% Sabbath for the Seattle, the grunge kind of thing going on. So it's like, you know, they've done that, but they've released some crap as well. I mean, I remember being a kid and sort of like, you know, the name Sabbath, you know, was like you'd hear it all the time, reading Kerrang magazine and stuff. And, you know, I remember like when I was really getting into metal, sort of like getting Metallica albums, and it's like, oh, here's the new Black Sabbath album coming out. I wonder what that's like. I was sort of listening to it going like, okay, not going to listen to that one again. But then you just kept hearing the name Sabbath, and I remember like just picking up this, it was this double cassette. And it's like, I think it's quite hard to find these days. It was some I think it was actually their manager re-released stuff because he owned the copyright on it and did his own. It's a really like weird compilation. It's got some bad tracks on it, but mostly it's great stuff. But it's all like the early Aussie stuff, all stuff off the first 5. I think there's a couple of later ones actually in there, but all the stuff off the first 5 records is just like untouchable. Like if you did a festival set made up of the first 5 Sabbath albums, it would be, you know, it would be heaven. All right. And hell.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. That's what we're going to do then. So Sabbath are your headliners. Only the third time they've been picked on the Fantastival podcast. So they return. They're going to be an amazing headline act. Who are going to play from 8:30 to 11. And at 11 o'clock, they're going to bring back on stage Faith No More, Soundgarden, Nick Drake and the Breeders. And they all get to play one song, Rick, of your choice. You've got an amazing lineup on your stage. They're all looking at you going, Rick, what we play, mate? So you get to tell them what the last song is. What are you going to have all your acts play together to close your fantasy festival?
It's a tough one with Nick Drake in there, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope he gets involved. And
I think he's going to join down. But I think one thing that might be kind of a fun way to end it, just like purely from an ego point of view, is we're all going to play Clones, the Ash song, together. I think it's like, you know, it's like as much as metal kids as we were when we grew up. I think, you know, there's not a huge amount of our music that kind of riffs quite as hard as Sabbath, but I think Clones is up there. Yeah, so we'll have a bit of that.
Wicked. All right, Ash are joining them on stage to play Clones for your encore. I love that. I was hoping it would be an Ash track. I was thinking, I'm not sure he's going to pick an Ash track, but I'm glad you did. Amazing encore to finish your fantasy festival. So let's lock it in then. We've got Fuzz Worship taking place. I've put in a graveyard in a church near Rick's house. So I think we'll hold it around that area. if you're all right with that.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we got Breeders be opening act. We got Nick Drake Super Seconds, Soundgarden Midway Madness, Faith No More your pre-headliners, and Black Sabbath playing a set, but all the material before 1975. And for their encore, they're all going to play Clones with Ash on stage. Rick, I'd be there, mate. I'd be there in a heartbeat. You happy to lock that into the Fantastival lineup?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Amazing. So before we finish this one, Rick, obviously a new year. I know Ash are doing some dates around January. What else is planned for 2024? What you got planned? What have Ash got planned? What are Burners Witches doing? I guess what are you doing as well?
Yeah, we got a couple of gigs coming up. I think there was one just announced tonight, which is we're doing a independent venue week show in Belfast at the OES Centre, which will be great. We love that place. It's a tiny little event. We actually launched the album there last year. But yeah, other than gigs this year, we got like festivals coming up in the summer. Latitude being one of them, which is a first for us as well. So that'll be exciting. First time playing Latitude. But yeah, we're just working on the next album, which it's pretty far advanced, even though we've just released one. Because as I was saying before, we did like some of the stuff on Race the Night was from pre-pandemic and then some post-pandemic. The reason for that is we kind of had like almost 2 albums worth of stuff and in a kind of like mishmash of styles. When we decided we wanted to like make it like kind of like try and hone things in to be a bit more thematic, so we released the kind of more guitar-y side of stuff. So we've got maybe a bit more sort of pop album coming up with like a few sort of probably a bit more experimental stuff going on in that. So it's probably, I want to say, probably 60. Well, certainly the drums are done. I think the bass is done. A lot of the guitars are done. There's like some of it's mixed, some of it's needing vocals, some of it's needing lyrics finished as well. So that's going to be the focus in between the gigs and stuff. So I don't think it'll be out this year, but hopefully very early 2025.
Sounds amazing. Look forward to that. And like you said, Burners Witches, maybe get in the studio in March to finish that or get that going.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be probably diving in at some point this week to try and finish lyrics, depending on how much of the snooker I can drag myself away from. And yeah, hopefully I'll have a finished album like some point this year. But I've got no plan as to what's going to happen with it as yet. But we'll see what happens because it's kind of weird. It was like, part of it was we'd a long time without any Ash albums. It was just like, I'll just get on with doing my own thing, and then I'm in the throes of that, and suddenly we got like 2 Ash albums in the go. So if nothing else, at least it's got us pulling our fingers out in the Ash front.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure people follow your social, but if people don't, obviously Ash are on Twitter, Facebook, Insta. Burners Witches are on Twitter, I believe. There's definitely a Twitter account, isn't there, for that? And then you've got your own Twitter account as well, right? So I guess just give us a roundup of where people can find you.
Yeah. I think Burners Witches is on Insta as well. But yeah. Anyway, can we go back a second? Can we just like? I know I'm not going to change any of the bands, but this is one thing. When I was looking at the timings of the festival, here's an interesting one. Was the set lengths?
Yeah.
Because this is a thing in Ash, right? There's one member of the band who just wants to play more and more and more all the time, right? Now, I put out a question on. I think to the point where I put out a question on Twitter, was like asking like, what's your ideal set length? And I got some interesting answers. This is a while ago as well, but this popped into my head just earlier on when I was looking at the festival lineup. So it's like the most interesting answer I had was actually from Miles Hunt of the Wonder Stuff.
Okay.
Ideal set length, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Some acts will be lucky to see just one song at 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but there's some people out there that will have like 3 hours. They want to go and see like Bruce Springsteen at every gig. So what I'm interested in, what's your ideal set length?
Probably as a kid in the 90s who went to gigs, probably about an hour and a half. But I guess the Fantastival set lengths is to try and get it all within one day and try and really condense the day and make people really think about who they're having in what slot. because I think if everyone had the same amount of time, the kind of open act, you could vary who you were seeing. So I try and condense them down and generally get a bit bigger towards the end of the day. But it's funny you should say that, because I listened to the Paul Weller podcast. He was recently on a pod about Paul Weller, and he went on to the last episode to complete it. And he was talking about his set lengths, and he said roughly about 90 minutes to 2 hours is his perfect time. He wouldn't want to do any more than that, because he feels like he can get everything done within that kind of confined list and doesn't need to do a 3-hour Springsteen or a 4-hour Springsteen set. He thinks it should be much shorter. So it's a really interesting idea about the perfect. I feel like 20 minutes is far too short though. If that's what Martin
says. I'd agree with you there for sure. That definitely caused some controversy and stuff. And he was going like, he was just like 20 minutes there. And a few people sort of jumped on and went, "You can't be serious." And he was like, "I definitely am. If I want to go and see a band, I usually go and watch like 3 songs, and then that's it. Off I go."
That's amazing. I will say I'm a fan of anything that goes over. I have been to quite a few Springsteen concerts, and there was one I went to see AC/DC at the Olympic Stadium in Stratford, and that was on the Saturday, and had Springsteen on the Sunday. And the first hour and a half, Springsteen just played like very rare cuts at Wembley Stadium, and I was like, mate, you could have not done that and you still would have done 2.5 hours of great stuff. So I feel like sometimes it can vary depending on what your state of mind is, but I see why people would think 3 hours might be a bit too much.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think even Black Sabbath, I'd be struggling with 3 hours of that.
Yeah. Well,
sure, it's like, and I think just from a sort of like an attention point of view as well, it's like, I think, you don't need to see everything you want to see.
Yeah.
I think it's good for people to walk away from a gig going like, I wish they'd played this, or I didn't hear that,
I feel like within the 2.5 hours, I feel like the first 5 minutes, you've got to have some leeway time, because there might be a big intro. I feel like an encore could take anywhere between 5 minutes. So I guess depending on the fantasy element, maybe it's more of a 2 hours, just over 2 hours, where people were talking and geeing up the crowd and whatever, potentially.
Yeah. I think for me, like an ideal set length would maybe be no more than 90 minutes.
I got to say, I did see it. I've only recall seeing Ash properly once, and that was just before lockdown in the Forum at a gig that you played with the Stereophonics. And Ash went on first and played for about an hour. And I got to be honest, I thought Ash blew the Phonics out of the water that night, because it was tight, it was compact. It must have been about 50, 55 minutes, maybe an hour. And you just played, like you just went and just smashed it. And whereas the Phonics were on for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it took them a while to get going, I thought it was an amazing set that night. I didn't know whether that's because of the time constraints that you had, where you're like, right, we're just going to absolutely pound it, or if that's what Ash normally do.
That's the thing as well, it's like some bands could have like a killer, 45-minute sets, but, if you went to see them do a 90-minute set, it would just be like, all right, lads, see you later. Enjoy the rest of it, don't mind me.
Absolutely. So what a way to end it. A bonus chat about set links. Who knew we'd be so insightful at set links. That was a great way to end it. So that is it. Thanks to everyone.
You're going to get a load of questions going like, what's your ideal length of podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. That's next.
And do you like it when someone just won't shut up and won't go?
Yeah. So that's it, like I said, 151st episode and the first one of 2024 done. If you've enjoyed this one, you can subscribe and give the podcast a review. You can do that on iTunes. So if you're listening on iTunes, give us a 5-star review. That'd be appreciated. If you're listening on Spotify, you can also give the pod a review. You do that by rating the show, and you can comment now on Spotify on each podcast episode. So if you're listening on Spotify, please do that. It gets much appreciated. We are also on Twitter, as well as Ash and Berners, Witches and Rick. So if you don't follow us, make sure to do so at Fantastival P, and give us an email. If you're not on Twitter, you can email the pod at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Normally we get some tracks from our guests, so I'll get some tracks from Rick. We'll make a nice little Spotify playlist from his Fantasy Festival lineup. So scroll down in your episode description and you'll find a nice little link to a playlist to hear some tracks from Rick's chosen acts. So Rick, great way to enter 2024. I feel like I was a bit rusty. It's the first time I've done this in about a month, but you've been a great guest. You've been an amazing guest, actually. How have you found being on the pod? I think your passion for music has really come through, and you've given some really good reasons about your chosen acts, and the set length was a really kind of nice add-on to the end. How have you found it, Rick?
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah. It's the kind of first thing I've done this year as well. So yeah, I can't remember the last time I did it. Oh well, probably a few months ago since I did a podcast. So I was feeling a bit rusty as well. But I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I loved it too. So
no, mate, smashed it. Best of luck for the future. I look forward to seeing what Ash and Burns' wishes have got for 2024 and beyond. So that's it for this one. Like I said, I'll be back next week with episode number 152. So please make sure to join me for that one. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.